You choose a funeral plan that will suit your needs and won't leave your family drowning in expenses after you're gone. Well, Maya Fisher-French joining us from our Cape Town studio, as she usually does, to help unpack the terms and conditions of your policy so you can keep your expectations in line with what you will receive when you actually claim. Maya, good morning. Certainly not something that we all want to think about when it comes to planning our funeral and planning how those who are left behind are actually going to be are going to navigate that, especially at a time like that. So you've done some shopping around, you've done some research. In general, what have you found? Firstly, let's start there, about funeral cover policies. Are they highly inflated and just way too expensive here?
So I think there's also two ways of looking at funeral cover. One of it is for yourself and making sure that you're not a burden on your family when you pass away. But for many, many people, it's actually taking out extended family funeral policies. So making sure that you have some obligation to assist towards your parents' funeral, for example, or siblings. So that is really the area where funeral cover can become quite expensive. And what actually happened is I had a reader, and I did an article about this last week, because I had a reader contacted me, and she had a quote for nearly 1,300 Rand for funeral cover. It was for herself, her daughter, her parents, and two siblings. And she said to me, is this a reasonable quote? So I thought, well, this is a good question. So I went around and I did some shopping. And one of the places I went to were the banks, because almost all banks, if you're a customer of theirs, offer funeral cover. And two of the banks came in. One came in. So remember, the original quote was just nearly 1,300 Rand. One bank came in at 422 Rand, the other bank at 500 Rand. So, I mean, just by shopping around, this woman could have saved 800 Rand a month on funeral cover. And I think that surprised me. I mean, I know that shopping around is good, and I always talk about comparative shopping, but wow, 800 Rand a month for the same cover. It's a monetary payout that you're going to get if you die, or your sibling or your mother or father die. And I worked out, she had a 4-year-old child, and I worked out that if she went and took one of the bank's offerings, saved 800 Rand, put that away, even in a relatively low-risk investment, by the time her child was 14, she would have about 140,000 Rand put away for that child's education. And that really, I just thought, you can't go around and just listen to whatever TV ad or just go to the local funeral provider. You've got to shop around, because it is a massive expense, and the amount that you can save by shopping around is just huge. And what you can do with that money instead and save. And I think we spend way too much money on funeral policies and not enough on saving for our children's education.
So, Maya, what are the things that when you are shopping around, when you do approach it, and the questions you need to be asking about what that cover actually gives you, what should you be looking for?
So I think one of the things is, so for example, in her case, she just wanted the cash. She didn't have any particular needs that needed to be met. So there, in that case, a real sort of, you just need to compare. So one of the big things I found out when I looked at the T's and C's is things like some of them include body repatriation. So, for example, one of the banks, over and above the payout, they actually did free body repatriation within the borders of South Africa, or sometimes within the SADC region. There may be other ones where they give you perhaps a little bit extra sort of a cash advance. So some of them do have T's and C's that you need to look at. You may be able to bring, if you cancel a policy, an existing policy, and bring the policy to them, there's no waiting periods. So you do need to look at the T's and C's and see if the policy is advantageous to you, or if there's that cheaper price is coming at a price. And the other thing that you can also look at is, in some cases, people do want to take out the cover with a funeral home because they actually want to have some say in their funeral. And this, we found, was also quite prevalent. So, for example, Metropolitan told me that their advisors will often work with someone who will say, listen, I want to have this type of casket, I want this kind of funeral, and they can actually leave a letter of wishes. And in that case, you would be dealing then perhaps with an advisor or a funeral home. So some funeral homes also offer a complete package. So that the money is going to be spent on your funeral because it's actually a package that's been bought. So a lot of research you can do a lot of research into it. But I think the important thing is that I really found, even, for example, with funeral homes, I think one of the comparisons I did with another funeral provider who would offer a package was, again, still came in a good 500 Rand cheaper than the quote that she had received. So I think, there's really, you can shop around. Getting less cover doesn't mean that you're getting worse cover. I mean, what I'm saying is less expensive cover doesn't necessarily mean less cover.
And I think that's a mistake we make. We think the more expensive it is, the better it is for us. Well, thank you very much for that, Maya Fisher-French. I mean, doing research for us that some of us can't or don't do for ourselves. Well, now you know. Check with your